I thought I was just coming over to babysit my grandson for a quiet evening. That's what my daughter-in-law told me. Nothing unusual, just a few hours, maybe a bedtime story, maybe some warm milk and cartoons. But the moment I stepped inside, something felt wrong. The house was too quiet, too still. And then I saw it right by the front door. A navy suitcase. Not just any suitcase. I knew exactly whose it was. The one woman my daughter-in-law swore would never set foot in that house again. And yet, there it was. If you've ever walked into a moment that changed everything you thought you knew about your family, I'd really like to hear your story. Where are you watching from today? What time is it for you right now? And if this kind of story speaks to you, don't forget to like and subscribe so we can go through this together. Emily's call came just after 4 p.m, right as I was rinsing a coffee mug and deciding whether the quiet in my kitchen felt peaceful or just lonely. Her name lit up my phone, and I remember hesitating for a second before answering. It wasn't that I didn't want to hear from her. It was that lately I rarely did unless there was a reason. "Sylvia," she said, her voice quick, almost clipped. Not unfriendly, just distracted. "Are you busy tonight?" I dried my hands on a towel and leaned against the counter. "No, I'm home." "What's going on?" "I need a favor," she said immediately. No small talk, no pause. "Can you come watch Ethan for a few hours?" Something came up. Something came up. I don't know why, but that phrase sat wrong with me the moment she said it. Maybe it was the way she rushed through it like she didn't want questions. Maybe it was because she didn't say where she was going or when she'd be back. Or maybe it was because over the past year, I had learned to notice the spaces between her words. Of course I said anyway. "I'd love to see him." There was a brief silence on the other end. Not gratitude, not relief, just silence. "Okay." "Good," she replied. "You can let yourself in. The door should be unlocked." "Unlocked," I repeated gently. "Is Ethan alone?" "No," she said quickly, then stopped herself. "I mean, he'll be fine. I just need you there. I'll explain later." Her voice tightened at the end like she had already said too much. "Emily," I said softer now. "Is everything all right?" Another pause. "And then I really have to go." "Thank you, Sylvia." The line clicked before I could say anything else. I stood there for a moment, still holding the phone, listening to the quiet hum of my refrigerator. The house felt even emptier than before. That was the thing about getting older, you start noticing patterns. Not because you want to, but because you've lived long enough to recognize when something doesn't fit. And that call didn't fit. Still, Ethan was my grandson, and I hadn't seen him properly in weeks, so I told myself not to overthink it. I finished rinsing the mug, set it upside down to dry, and walked into my bedroom to grab my purse. As I passed the mirror, I caught a glimpse of myself. Gray hair pulled back neatly, cardigan buttoned, the same soft lines in my face that had been there for years now. I looked steady, reliable. The kind of person people called when they needed help, but lately I had begun to wonder if that was all I was to them. I shook the thought away. This wasn't about me. This was about Ethan. I picked up a small bag of cookies from the pantry, his favorite chocolate chip ones, and slipped them into my purse. It was a habit I never broke no matter how old he got. A little something from Grandma always made him smile. At least, it used to. The drive to Daniel and Emily's house took about 20 minutes. The sun was still out, casting long golden streaks across the quiet suburban streets. Everything looked normal, peaceful even, but I couldn't shake the feeling sitting in my chest. Emily hadn't mentioned Daniel once. Not where he was. Not if he'd be home later. Nothing. That more than anything unsettled me, because no matter how strained things had become between us over the years, Emily was always controlled, careful with her words, deliberate. She didn't forget to mention things. She chose not to. As I pulled into their driveway, I noticed Daniel's car was gone. Emily's too. The house stood there silent, waiting. I turned off the engine and sat for a moment staring at the front door. I don't know why I didn't just get out right away. Maybe some part of me already knew that once I stepped inside, whatever was waiting for me in there wouldn't be simple, wouldn't be easy. But then I thought of Ethan, and that was enough. I grabbed my purse, stepped out of the car, and walked up the path. The air felt still, almost too still, like the world was holding its breath. When I reached the front door, I tried the handle. Unlocked. Just like Emily had said. I pushed it open slowly. "Ethan!" I called out as I stepped inside. My voice echoed slightly through the house. No answer. The silence wrapped around me, instantly thick and unnatural. "Ethan, sweetheart." "It's Grandma Sylvia." A small sound came from deeper inside the house. A faint shuffle. And then a moment later, I heard footsteps. Quick. Light. He appeared at the end of the hallway, his small frame almost swallowed by the shadows behind him. The moment he saw me, his face changed something between relief and something else I couldn't quite name. "Grandma," he said, running toward me. I bent down just in time to catch him as he threw his arms around me. I held him tightly, breathing in the familiar scent of his hair, the warmth of his small body grounding me. "I missed you," I whispered. "I missed you too," he said, but his voice was quieter than usual. Different. I pulled back just enough to look at him. "Hey," I said gently, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead. "Are you okay?" He nodded quickly. Too quickly. "Where's Mommy?" I asked. He hesitated. That hesitation, so small, so brief, sent a ripple of unease through me. "She had to go out," he said. "And Daddy—" Another pause. "I don't know." I studied his face, the way his eyes flickered away from mine, the way his fingers twisted the fabric of his shirt. Children don't lie the way adults do. They don't construct stories. They just avoid. And Ethan was avoiding something. "That's all right," I said softly, forcing a smile. "You've got me tonight, okay?" He nodded again, but he didn't smile back. I stood up slowly, taking his hand in mine as I stepped further into the house. That's when I noticed it. The stillness. Not the peaceful kind. The kind that feels like something just happened, or is about to. I glanced around the living room. A chair slightly out of place. A blanket crumpled on the couch. A glass sitting on the coffee table half full. Details most people might overlook. But I didn't. Not anymore. "Ethan," I said gently, keeping my voice calm. "What were you doing before I got here?" He shrugged. "Watching TV. The television was off." I didn't point that out. Instead, I squeezed his hand. "Why don't we go sit down for a bit?" He didn't argue. He just followed me quietly. And as I guided him toward the living room, I felt it again, that quiet, creeping sense that whatever I had walked into tonight wasn't just a simple favor. It was something else, something hidden, something waiting to be uncovered. And I had a feeling I was only beginning to see the edges of it. I didn't see the suitcase right away. If I had, maybe everything would have unfolded faster. Maybe I would have understood sooner. But instead, I let myself settle into the living room beside Ethan, trying to smooth over the strange tension in the air with something familiar. "Did you eat yet?" I asked, setting my purse down. He shook his head. "All right," I said gently. "How about we get you something? And then maybe those cookies I brought." That got the smallest flicker of a reaction. Not quite a smile, but close enough to make my chest ache. "Okay," he murmured. I stood up, taking his hand again, and we walked toward the kitchen. The house felt different the deeper we went. Less like a home and more like a space someone had moved through quickly, without finishing what they started. The kitchen lights were on, but the room felt abandoned. A plate sat on the counter with a few uneaten bites of something cold. A chair was pushed back at an awkward angle, like someone had stood up too fast. I paused for just a second, my eyes scanning everything. "Stay right here, sweetheart," I said softly. He didn't move. I opened the fridge more out of habit than hunger and pulled out a carton of milk. As I turned, I noticed something else. Ethan hadn't taken his eyes off the hallway, not the kitchen. The hallway leading toward the front door. That same tightness returned to my chest. I poured the milk into a glass and handed it to him. "Here you go." "Thanks," he said, taking it with both hands. His fingers trembled slightly. I crouched down in front of him. "Ethan," I said quietly, "did something happen before I got here?" His eyes flicked to mine, then quickly away. "No." It was too fast. Too rehearsed. I didn't push. "Not yet." "Okay," I said, gently rising back to my feet. "Let's bring this into the living room." We walked back together, and that's when I saw it. The suitcase. It sat just inside the entryway, close enough to the door that someone could grab it quickly. Navy blue. Medium-sized. The handle extended halfway as if it had been pulled along recently and then left exactly where it stopped. I froze. Something about it hit me immediately sharp, unmistakable recognition. I let go of Ethan's hand without realizing it and took a slow step closer. There are objects in this world that carry memory with them. Not just what they are, but who they belong to. The way a coat might remind you of a person before you even see their face. This suitcase was like that. I knew it, even before I saw the tag. I bent down slowly, my fingers hovering just above the fabric as if touching it would confirm something I wasn't ready to accept. And then I saw the name, Patricia Carter. My breath caught in my throat. For a moment, everything around me seemed to blur the walls. The furniture, even the sound of Ethan shifting behind me, faded into something distant. Patricia Carter, Emily's mother. The woman Emily had spent years insisting was manipulative, selfish. Someone who had no place in her life. Or in this house. "I don't want her near my son," Emily had said once, her voice cold and certain. "She's done enough damage." That was the story I had been told, the only version I had ever heard, and yet, here was Patricia's suitcase, inside this house. Not tucked away, not hidden, but right by the door, as if she had just arrived, or had been forced to leave. I straightened slowly, my heart beginning to pound. "Ethan," I said, keeping my voice as calm as I could manage. "Whose suitcase is this?" He didn't answer right away. I turned to look at him. He stood a few steps behind me, his small hands gripping the hem of his shirt again, his eyes wide, not confused but cautious, like he was measuring what he should say. "It's Grandma Patricia's," he said finally, barely above a whisper. The words settled heavily in the air. "Grandma Patricia," I repeated gently. "Was she here?" He nodded. When another pause. Before. Such a small word, but it carried so much weight. "Is she still here?" I asked. He shook his head quickly. "No. Do you know where she went?" His eyes filled with something I hadn't expected. Not fear, not confusion, sadness. "She was crying," he said quietly. The simplicity of it made my chest tighten. Crying. I took a slow breath, trying to steady myself. "Why was she crying, sweetheart?" He looked down at the floor. "I don't know." But again that hesitation, that tiny fracture in the truth. Children don't always lie with words. Sometimes they lie with silence. I walked over to him slowly and knelt down, placing my hands gently on his shoulders. "You can tell me anything," I said softly. "You know that, right?" He nodded, but his lips pressed together. "I won't be mad," I added. "I know." "Did Mommy say something to her?" His eyes flicked up at mine, then quickly away again. That was answer enough. I felt a chill move through me. "Ethan," I said carefully. "Did Mommy and Grandma Patricia have a fight?" He swallowed. "Yeah." My heart sank. "Was Daddy here?" Another nod. "And what happened?" He hesitated longer this time, like he was deciding how much he was allowed to say. "They were loud," he said finally. "And Mommy said Grandma Patricia had to go." I closed my eyes for just a second. "Did she leave on her own, I think, so he said. She took her bag, but then she came back." That made me open my eyes again. She came back. He nodded slowly. "She forgot her medicine." A strange, uneasy feeling settled in my stomach. "She came back for it." "Yeah." "But Mommy was mad." "How mad?" He didn't answer with words this time. Instead, he looked toward the hallway again. That same hallway he had been watching since I arrived. The one leading deeper into the house. "Ethan," I said softly, following his gaze. "What's down there?" He didn't move, but his voice dropped even lower. "That's where she stayed. Stayed. Not visited. Not passed through. Stayed." My pulse quickened. "Stayed where I asked." He lifted a small hand and pointed. "Laundry room." For a moment I couldn't speak. The laundry room. A small windowless space off the back hallway. I had been in it plenty of times, just enough room for a washer, a dryer, and a narrow strip of floor between them. Not a place for guests. Not a place for anyone to stay. Why would she stay there? I asked more to myself than to him. Ethan shifted again, his eyes still fixed on that hallway. "She didn't want Mommy to see her," he said. A cold wave washed over me. I stood up slowly, my body moving before my mind fully caught up. "Stay here, sweetheart," I said quietly. But as I took my first step toward the hallway, I already knew one thing with absolute certainty. This was no ordinary visit. And whatever had happened in this house before I arrived was far worse than I had imagined. I didn't want to walk down that hallway. It wasn't fear exactly. It was something quieter, a kind of knowing, the kind that settles in your bones before your mind can catch up. The kind that tells you without words that once you step forward, you won't be able to pretend things are normal anymore. But I stepped forward anyway. "Stay right here, Ethan," I said again, softer this time, glancing back at him. He didn't argue. He just nodded and climbed slowly onto the couch, his small body curling inward, as if he was trying to take up less space in a house that suddenly felt too big. I moved down the hallway, each step measured. The air felt different back there, heavier, like something had been said that hadn't settled yet, like the walls were still holding on to it. The laundry room door was slightly open. I pushed it gently. The light inside was on, and what I saw made my chest tighten in a way I can't quite explain. There was a blanket on the floor, not folded, not stored, spread out thin and uneven like someone had been lying there. Next to it, a small pillow, one of the decorative ones from the living room, I realized not something meant for sleeping. On top of the dryer sat a paper bag half open. Inside, I could see a bottle of medication, a toothbrush still in its packaging, and a folded shirt. Someone had been staying here, not visiting, not passing through, living. I stepped inside slowly, my fingers brushing against the edge of the washing machine as if I needed something solid to hold on to. "Patricia!" I whispered under my breath, though she wasn't there. My eyes moved around the room, taking in every detail. The way the blanket had been pushed slightly toward the wall as if someone had tried to make it less visible. The faint crease in the fabric that suggested more than one night spent on that cold tile floor. 2 nights, Ethan had said. At least 2. I swallowed hard. Whatever story Emily had told about her mother over the years, this didn't match it. This wasn't someone imposing herself into a home. This was someone being hidden inside it. I stepped back out into the hallway, my mind racing now, trying to piece together what didn't make sense. Why would Patricia be here? But not allowed to be seen. Why would she be sleeping in a laundry room? And why did she leave her suitcase by the front door? Unless no. I stopped myself. Don't assume. Not yet, but the unease in my chest had turned into something sharper now, something closer to dread. As I walked back toward the living room, my eyes caught something else, a small trash bin tucked near the corner of the hallway. The lid was slightly ajar. I don't know what made me stop. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was the way everything in this house felt just a little too unfinished. I bent down slowly and lifted the lid. Inside were crumpled papers, tissues, a torn envelope. Nothing unusual at first glance, but something white folded tightly at the bottom caught my attention. I reached in and pulled it out. It was a piece of paper, creased, wrinkled like someone had crushed it in anger and thrown it away without a second thought. I smoothed it out carefully. The handwriting wasn't neat. It looked rushed, pressed too hard into the paper. She signs tonight or she leaves with nothing. My breath caught. I read it again. And again. The words didn't change. They just settled deeper. She signs tonight, leaves with nothing. I felt the hallway tilt slightly, or maybe it was just me. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't a family disagreement. This was pressure, control, an ultimatum. And suddenly, everything I had seen started to shift into place in a way I didn't want it to. The hidden sleeping arrangement, the rushed call, the missing adults, the crying. I pressed the paper between my fingers, my heart pounding louder now. She signs. Signs what? My mind jumped back to the voicemail Ethan had mentioned earlier. No, not mentioned. I hadn't heard it yet, but something about this, it hinted at something bigger, legal, serious, dangerous. I stood there for a moment staring at the paper, feeling the weight of it settle into my chest, and then I heard it, a small sound behind me. I turned quickly. Ethan stood at the end of the hallway, his eyes fixed on me. "I told you to stay in the living room," I said gently, trying to keep the tension out of my voice. "I didn't want you to go alone," he said. The innocence in that sentence nearly broke me. I softened immediately, kneeling down to his level again. "You don't have to worry about me," I said quietly. He shook his head. "I do. For a moment, I didn't know what to say. So instead, I reached out and pulled him into a hug. He held on to me tighter than usual. Longer, too. When he finally pulled back, I looked into his eyes. "Ethan," I said carefully when Mommy and Grandma Patricia were talking. "Did you hear what they said?" He hesitated. "I wasn't supposed to listen," he said. "I know," I replied softly. "But sometimes we hear things anyway." He nodded slowly. "She said if Grandma Patricia didn't sign, she would have to leave," he whispered. The words echoed the note in my hand. "Exactly." My stomach dropped. Did she say what she had to sign? He shook his head. "No. But Daddy said it was important." Daddy. Daniel. A heaviness settled over me that I couldn't ignore anymore. "Did Daddy seem upset?" I asked. Ethan thought for a moment. "No," he said. That answer hit harder than I expected. "No. He was calm," Ethan added. "Like when he talks to people on the phone. Controlled. Measured. Professional." I felt something inside me shift. Daniel had always been the kind of man who could keep his emotions in check. Even as a boy, he didn't lash out. He didn't raise his voice. He made decisions quietly, deliberately, and suddenly that trait didn't feel comforting anymore. It felt calculated. I stood up slowly, taking Ethan's hand again. "We're going to stay together tonight, okay?" I said. He nodded. "Okay." I glanced back down at the paper in my hand, then folded it carefully and slipped it into my purse. This wasn't something to ignore. This wasn't something to wait on. Whatever was happening here was happening fast. And if I was right, if Patricia was being pressured into signing something she didn't fully understand, then tonight wasn't just another evening. It was a deadline. And I had just walked into the middle of it. I didn't go back to the kitchen. I didn't turn on the television. And I certainly didn't pretend that everything was normal. Instead, I sat down on the couch with Ethan tucked close beside me, his small hand wrapped around two of my fingers like he was anchoring himself, and maybe me too. The house felt different now that I understood what I was looking at. Not just quiet, controlled. Like something had been carefully managed until it slipped. "Do you want one of the cookies I brought?" I asked gently, trying to soften the moment. He nodded. I reached into my purse and handed him one. He held it for a second before taking a bite, slow and absent-minded, like he wasn't really tasting it. "Children always know more than we think. They just don't always have the words for it." "Ethan," I said quietly, "how long was Grandma Patricia here?" He chewed slowly, then swallowed. 2 days, he said. 2 days. I let that settle. "And she stayed in the laundry room the whole time." He nodded. "Mommy said she couldn't be in the other rooms. Did she say why?" "She said Grandma Patricia wasn't supposed to be here. Not supposed to be here." The phrase echoed in my mind, bumping against everything I had seen. "Did Daddy say anything about it?" I asked. Ethan shifted slightly. "He told Mommy to just get it done. Get it done." I felt my stomach tighten. "What does that mean?" I asked softly. Ethan shook his head. "I don't know." But I could see it in his eyes. He had heard enough to feel that something wasn't right. That was the part that hurt the most. This wasn't just affecting Patricia. It was shaping what Ethan believed was normal. And I couldn't let that happen. I took a slow breath, steadying myself. "Okay," I said gently. "Why don't you go pick a movie?" "Something you like." He hesitated. "I don't want to go by myself." My heart clenched. I'll come with you, I said immediately. We stood up together, and I guided him toward the television. He chose something simple, an animated movie he'd watched dozens of times before. Comfort, predictability, things he clearly needed right now. As the movie started, I sat beside him, but my mind wasn't on the screen. It kept circling back. Patricia Carter. Emily had always spoken about her in a way that left no room for doubt. A selfish woman, a manipulator, someone who had made her childhood impossible. I had believed her, not because I knew Patricia personally, but because I trusted Emily. Or at least, I had. But the image in my mind of that woman the one Emily described didn't match the one I was starting to see now. A woman sleeping on a cold tile floor, hiding in a laundry room, crying. That wasn't power. That was desperation. Grandma Ethan's voice pulled me back. Yes, sweetheart. He looked up at me, his eyes searching. Are we in trouble? The question hit me like a sudden drop. No, I said firmly, reaching for his hand. You're not in trouble. But Mommy sounded mad when she left, he said quietly. I softened my voice. Sometimes grown-ups get upset when they're dealing with things they don't understand, I said. But that doesn't mean you've done anything wrong. He nodded slowly, but I could tell he wasn't completely convinced. I'm here, I added gently. And I'm not going anywhere tonight. That seemed to ease him at least a little. He leaned against me, his head resting on my arm. I wrapped my arm around him, holding him close. And then something else occurred to me. Ethan, I said softly when Grandma Patricia was here. Did she talk to you? He nodded. What did she say? He thought for a moment. She asked me if I liked school, he said, and if I had friends. That sounds nice. He nodded again. She smiled a lot. But then she cried when she thought I wasn't looking. I closed my eyes briefly. That quiet kind of crying, the kind you try to hide, said more than anything else. Did she ever say why she was here? I asked. Ethan shook his head. No. But she said she didn't have anywhere else to go. The words settled heavily in my chest. Nowhere else to go. So this wasn't just a visit. This was her last option. I looked around the living room again, seeing it differently now. The furniture, the photos, the life Daniel and Emily had built, and somewhere in the middle of it, Patricia had been reduced to a hidden presence, an inconvenience, something to be dealt with. Grandma Ethan said again, Yes. Is Grandma Patricia coming back? I hesitated. I don't know. I admitted gently. He looked down at his hands. I hope she does, he said quietly. That surprised me. Why's that? I asked. He shrugged. She told me I was kind. The simplicity of that answer broke something inside me. Kind. Not spoiled. Not difficult. Not anything complicated. Just kind. I reached out and brushed his hair back from his forehead. You are kind, I said softly. He looked up at me. Are you going to tell Mommy? The question hung in the air. I could feel the weight of it. The choice. The line I was standing on. I'm going to make sure everyone is safe, I said carefully. He studied my face for a moment like he was trying to understand what that meant. Then he nodded. Okay. The movie continued playing in the background, bright colors and cheerful voices filling the room in a way that felt almost out of place. Because underneath it all, something else was unfolding. Something much darker. And I could feel it building. Whatever Emily and Daniel had started, whatever they were trying to force Patricia to do, it wasn't finished. Not yet, and I had a growing feeling that the next time I heard from them, it wouldn't be a request. It would be a demand. I tightened my hold on Ethan slightly as if I could shield him from what was coming. Because one thing was becoming painfully clear. This wasn't just about the past anymore. It was about what was about to happen next. And I wasn't going to let it happen without a fight. The house phone rang just as the movie reached one of its louder scenes. Ethan startled beside me, his small body tensing against my arm. "It's okay," I said softly, reaching for the remote to lower the volume. "It's just the phone." But even as I stood up, something about the sound felt different. Not urgent. Not casual either. Just persistent. Like someone who expected to be heard. "I'll be right back," I told Ethan. He nodded, though his eyes followed me as I walked toward the kitchen where the base of the phone sat on the counter. The ringing stopped just as I reached it, and for a moment I thought that was it. Whoever it was had hung up. But then the red light blinked. One new message. I hesitated. In another life, I might have ignored it, told myself it wasn't my place, that whatever was going on between Daniel, Emily, and Patricia wasn't something I should interfere in. But that was before I saw the laundry room, before I found the note, before I saw the fear in Ethan's eyes. Now, I pressed play. A man's voice filled the quiet kitchen, measured, professional, slightly impatient. "Ms. Carter, this is Jonathan Reeves from Reeves and Holt Legal Services. I'm following up regarding the documents we discussed earlier today. As I mentioned, the power of attorney and asset transfer forms need to be signed before close of business tonight to proceed with the liquidation of the property." My fingers tightened around the edge of the counter. Property. Liquidation. "We're on a strict timeline," the voice continued. "Mr. Daniel Barrett has confirmed that all parties are in agreement. Please return my call as soon as possible to finalize arrangements." The message ended with a soft click. Silence rushed back in louder than before. I stood there staring at the phone, my mind trying to catch up with what I had just heard. Power of attorney. Asset transfer. Liquidation of property. And Daniel had confirmed that all parties were in agreement. All parties, except the one person who had been sleeping on the floor of a laundry room. I felt something inside me shift, quiet but decisive. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't even a messy family dispute. This was a plan. A coordinated, deliberate plan. And Patricia was the target. I replayed the message once more just to be sure I hadn't misunderstood. I hadn't. Every word was clear. Every detail pointed in the same direction. Someone Daniel and Emily were trying to push Patricia into signing away control of her assets, her property, her independence, and they needed it done tonight. I turned off the message and stood there for a moment, my heart pounding harder now, because something else had just become clear. This wasn't over. Whatever had happened earlier, whatever argument had driven Patricia out of the house, was just one step in a larger sequence. They hadn't finished, and they wouldn't stop. "Not unless someone stopped them." Sylvia Ethan's voice came from behind me, small and uncertain. I turned quickly, softening my expression. "Yes, sweetheart." He stood at the edge of the kitchen, his hands clasped together. Who was that? I walked over to him, kneeling down again so we were eye level. "Just someone leaving a message," I said gently. "Was it Mommy? No." He studied my face carefully, like he was trying to read something deeper. "Are we still okay?" he asked. That question again. That quiet fear. I placed my hands on his shoulders. "We're okay," I said firmly. "You're safe." "I promise." He nodded, but his grip on my sleeve tightened slightly. "Okay. I stood up slowly, taking his hand. "Why don't we go back to the living room?" I suggested. He followed without hesitation. As we sat back down, the movie continued playing, but neither of us really watched it. My mind was somewhere else entirely, running through possibilities, timelines, decisions. If the lawyer was expecting those documents signed tonight, that meant Daniel and Emily were under pressure too, which meant they would come back. Soon. And when they did, they wouldn't be calm. They wouldn't be reasonable. They would be focused on one thing: finishing what they started. I looked down at Ethan, his head resting lightly against my arm. He deserved better than this. Better than being caught in the middle of something he didn't understand. Better than learning that people he trusted could manipulate and pressure someone vulnerable. I exhaled slowly, steadying myself. There was one more thing I needed to confirm. "Ethan," I said quietly, when Grandma Patricia was here, "did Mommy give her any papers?" He shifted slightly, thinking. "Yeah," he said. "A lot of papers. What did Grandma Patricia do?" "She didn't sign them." A small flicker of relief passed through me. "Did Mommy get upset?" He nodded. "She said if Grandma Patricia didn't sign, she wouldn't help her anymore. Help her." The word twisted in my mind. That wasn't help. That was leverage. "What about Daddy?" I asked carefully. Ethan hesitated. "He said it would be easier if she just did it," he said softly. "Easier. For who? Not for Patricia. Not for the woman who was being pushed into a corner, told to choose between losing everything or signing it away." I leaned back slightly, my thoughts settling into something more focused now. This wasn't just about understanding what had happened, it was about what I was going to do next. Because doing nothing was no longer an option. I reached into my purse and took out my phone. There was one person I trusted to see this clearly. Someone who had spent years navigating situations just like this. Harold Green. We hadn't spoken in a while, but I knew if I called him, he would answer. I hesitated for just a second before dialing. The phone rang twice, then 3 times, and then Sylvia. His voice was older than I remembered, but still steady. "Harold," I said quietly, "I need your help." There was no hesitation on his end. "What's going on?" I glanced at Ethan, then lowered my voice slightly. "I think my son is trying to force his mother-in-law to sign over her assets," I said, "and I think it's happening tonight." Silence. Then, "Are you with the woman now?" "No," I said, "but I have evidence. And I have her grandson." Another pause. Then his tone shifted sharper now. Focused. "Listen to me carefully," he said. "Do not let those documents get signed. Not under pressure. Not without proper representation." "I won't," I replied. "Good," he said. "And, Sylvia, if what you're saying is accurate, this could be considered financial exploitation, possibly coercion." The words settled heavily in my chest. I had suspected as much, but hearing it out loud made it real. "I'll call you back in 10 minutes, Harold continued. "I need to check a few things. In the meantime, stay where you are. And don't let them intimidate you." "I won't," I said again. But as I ended the call, I realized something else. This situation was about to escalate. Because if Daniel and Emily were expecting compliance tonight, and instead they found resistance, then whatever came next wouldn't be quiet. The back door opened so quietly, I almost didn't hear it. Almost. It was a soft click, careful, controlled, like someone who didn't want to draw attention. But in a house that had been wrapped in tension for the past hour, even the smallest sound felt amplified. Ethan stiffened beside me. I felt it instantly. He lifted his head, eyes wide, his small hand gripping my sleeve. "Grandma," he whispered. I was already standing. "Stay here," I said, my voice low but firm. But I didn't wait for him to answer. I moved toward the hallway again, my heart pounding, not from fear, but from something sharper. Anticipation. Because I knew who it had to be. And I was right. Patricia Carter stood just inside the back doorway, her hand still resting on the knob as if she hadn't fully decided whether to come in or turn around and leave again. She looked smaller than I remembered. Not physically exactly, but in the way she carried herself. Her shoulders curved inward, her posture guarded like she had learned to take up as little space as possible. Her hair, once carefully styled, was pulled back loosely. A few strands had come undone, framing a face that looked more tired than old, but it was her eyes that held me. Red, swollen, and still trying to stay composed. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then I took a step forward. "Patricia," I said softly. She flinched. Just slightly, but I saw it. The instinctive reaction of someone who expected to be confronted. "I'm sorry," she said quickly, her voice unsteady. "I didn't mean to come back. I forgot my medication." Her words rushed together like she had rehearsed them in her head. I slowed my steps, careful not to overwhelm her. "It's all right," I said gently. "You don't need to apologize." Her eyes flickered past me, scanning the room. "Emily and Daniel, are they here?" "No," I said. The tension in her shoulders loosened just a fraction. "Okay," she murmured. That single word carried more relief than anything else. I stepped closer now, close enough to see the slight tremor in her hands. "You can come in," I said quietly. She hesitated, then nodded, stepping inside and closing the door behind her again carefully, like she was trying not to leave a trace. Ethan had already moved off the couch. "Grandma Patricia," he said, his voice soft but certain. Her face changed the moment she saw him. The tension didn't disappear, but something warmer broke through it. "Hi, sweetheart," she said, her voice gentler now. He walked over to her without hesitation, wrapping his arms around her waist, and she held him, tightly, too tightly for a simple greeting. I watched her close her eyes for a brief second, as if that small moment of contact was the only thing keeping her steady. When she pulled back, she brushed a hand over his hair. "You've been good?" she asked. He nodded. "I told Grandma Sylvia you were here." Her hand paused mid-motion. Slowly, she looked up at me. There was something in her expression now, something cautious, evaluating, as if she was trying to decide how much I already knew. "I'm glad she came," she said carefully. I met her gaze. "So am I." There was a pause. Not uncomfortable, but loaded. "Can we talk?" I asked gently. Her eyes shifted again, this time toward Ethan. He understood more than either of us said out loud. "I'll go watch my movie," he said quietly, stepping back. Patricia hesitated. "Stay where I can see you," she told him. He nodded and returned to the couch. Only then did she turn back to me. I gestured toward the kitchen. "This way." She followed her steps, slow, deliberate. Once we were out of Ethan's immediate hearing range, I turned to face her fully. For a moment, I didn't speak. I just looked at her. Really looked. The exhaustion, the strain, the quiet fear she was trying to hold together. You've been staying here, I said finally. It wasn't a question. Her lips pressed together. Yes, in the laundry room. A small nod. For how long? 2 nights, exactly what Ethan had said. I took a slow breath. Patricia. Why? Her eyes dropped to the floor. I didn't have anywhere else to go, she said softly. There it was again. The same sentence Ethan had repeated, and hearing it from her made it heavier. My house was sold last week, she continued, her voice barely above a whisper. Emily handled the paperwork. She said it was the best option. The words felt too neat, too controlled. Was it your decision? I asked gently. She didn't answer right away. That silence told me everything. I trusted her, she said after a moment. She said she would help me manage things, that I wouldn't have to worry. I felt a familiar ache rise in my chest. Trust, such a simple word, and yet so easily broken. She brought me here, Patricia went on. Said I could stay temporarily while we finalized some documents. What documents, I asked, though? I already had a feeling I knew. Her hands trembled slightly. Power of attorney, account transfers, some property matters, the same words from the voicemail, the same direction. And have you signed anything? I asked carefully. Her head snapped up. No, she said quickly. A flicker of something passed through her eyes, fear, but also something stronger. Resistance. I told her I needed time, she added, that I wanted to review everything. And how did she respond? Patricia let out a small, humorless breath. She said there wasn't time. Of course she did. My jaw tightened slightly. Did Daniel say anything? At his name, Patricia's expression shifted again. Something more complicated. He tried to keep things calm, she said slowly, but he agreed with her. Agreed. I thought of Ethan's words. It would be easier if she just did it. Patricia, I said gently, they're trying to pressure you. She looked at me, her eyes filling with something I hadn't seen before. Not confusion. Recognition. I know, she whispered. The admission hung between us. I just didn't expect it from her, she added. Her voice broke slightly on the last word. Her, not them, her daughter. I stepped a little closer. You don't have to sign anything, I said firmly. Not tonight. Not under pressure. She shook her head. I already told them no. Then why are you here? I asked softly. She hesitated, then reached into her coat pocket. Her fingers fumbled slightly before pulling something out. A small orange prescription bottle. I forgot this, she said. But the way she held it, like it was more than just medication, made me look closer, and then I saw it, tucked behind the bottle. Folded papers. Not just any papers. Documents. Legal ones. My breath caught. Patricia, I said slowly. What else did you take? She hesitated. Then almost reluctantly, she unfolded the papers. I didn't need to read them fully. The headings were enough. Power of attorney. Asset transfer agreement. Property liquidation authorization. All prepared. All ready. All waiting for a signature. And at the bottom of one page, I saw it. A blank line. Her name typed neatly beneath it. Waiting. My chest tightened. They said if I didn't sign tonight, she began. You'd have nothing, I finished quietly. Her eyes widened. You heard that. I shook my head slightly. I found the note. Silence fell between us again. But this time it wasn't uncertain. It was clear. Defined. "This isn't right," I said firmly. "And it's not legal, not the way they're doing it." Her hands trembled again, clutching the papers tighter. "I didn't know where to go," she admitted. I reached out slowly, placing my hand over hers. "You're not alone anymore." She looked up at me, and for the first time since she walked through that door, I saw something shift. Not fear, not exhaustion, something else. The smallest flicker of hope. And in that moment, I knew one thing for certain. Whatever happened next, I wasn't going to let them force her into anything. Not tonight, not ever again. I didn't realize I was shaking until I tried to pour Patricia a glass of water. The glass tapped lightly against the edge of the sink, a soft, uneven sound that echoed louder than it should have in the quiet kitchen. "Here," I said, handing it to her. "Thank you," she replied, her voice steadier than her hands. We stood across from each other for a moment, two women both past the age where we should have had to deal with something like this, and yet here we were, caught in the middle of something neither of us had created, but both of us would have to face. "Sit down," I said, gently pulling out a chair. She hesitated before lowering herself into it, placing the documents carefully on the table as if they might disappear if she let them out of her sight. I sat across from her, my fingers resting lightly against the edge of the papers. "Patricia," I said quietly, "I need you to tell me everything. From the beginning." She nodded slowly, her eyes drifting down to the documents before coming back to me. "It started about 3 months ago," she said. "Emily called me out of the blue." Her voice carried something soft underneath it, something almost hopeful. She said she wanted to reconnect, that she'd been thinking about the past, and that she wanted to do better. I felt something tighten in my chest. Of course she did. "They invited me over for dinner," Patricia continued. "Daniel was there too. He was polite, attentive even. They both were." I leaned back slightly, already recognizing the pattern. "They made it feel like I was being welcomed back into the family," she said. "And you believed them," I said softly. She gave a small, sad smile. "I wanted to." That honesty hit harder than anything else. Not foolishness, not naivety, just hope. "After a few visits," she went on, "Emily started bringing up my house. Said it was too much for me to manage on my own, that I could simplify things. And did you agree?" "At first, no," she said. "But she kept insisting. Said the market was strong, that I could sell now and secure my future." I nodded slowly. "And Daniel?" Her expression shifted again. "He supported her," she said. "He explained things in a way that sounded reasonable. Numbers, timing, risks. I could picture it clearly. Daniel had always been good with words, especially when he wanted something. They told me they would help me manage the money," Patricia added. "That I wouldn't have to worry about anything. And that's when you agreed to sell," I asked. She nodded. "Yes." A quiet wave of anger rose inside me. Not at her. Never at her. At the way trust had been used as leverage. And after the sale, I pressed. Her hands tightened slightly around the glass. "That's when things changed." Of course they did. "They started talking about paperwork," she said, "power of attorney, account transfers. Said it would make things easier if they handled everything." "And you hesitated," I said. "I did," she admitted. "I asked for time. I wanted to review things properly, and that's when the pressure started." Her eyes met mine. "Yes." The word was barely audible. "They said it needed to be done quickly," she continued. "That delays could cause problems. That it might affect taxes, investments, things I didn't fully understand." I leaned forward slightly. Did they explain the documents clearly? She shook her head. Not really. They summarized, simplified. But when I tried to read them myself, she trailed off. They didn't like that I finished. No, she said. Silence settled between us again, but this time it wasn't empty. It was full of understanding. And the argument tonight, I asked. Her breath caught slightly. I told them I wouldn't sign, she said. Not until I had someone else look at the documents. And Emily Patricia's eyes filled with something deeper now. Pain. She said I was being ungrateful, she whispered. That after everything she had done for me, I was making things difficult. I felt my jaw tighten. Did she raise her voice? Yes. And Daniel Patricia hesitated. He tried to calm things down, she said slowly. But not in the way I expected. What do you mean? He said. It would be easier if I just signed. The same words, the same tone Ethan had described. Calm, measured, detached. I closed my eyes briefly, steadying myself. That was my son, my child. And yet, I barely recognized the man he had become in this moment. What happened after that? I asked quietly. I said no. Patricia replied. Again. And then her grip on the glass tightened. Emily told me I had until tonight to decide. The words echoed the note I had found. She said if I didn't sign... Patricia's voice faltered. I would have to leave, and I wouldn't receive any support from them moving forward. Support. The word felt bitter now. And Daniel? I asked, though I already knew the answer. He didn't stop her, Patricia said. The confirmation settled heavily in the room. He just stood there, she added, like it was already decided. I exhaled slowly. Every piece was falling into place. Every doubt I had tried to give them, slipping away. And after that I pressed. I packed my things, she said. I told them I needed air. Time to think. And they let you leave? She gave a small hollow laugh. They didn't think I had anywhere else to go. The truth of that statement hung in the air. They were right, she added quietly. I reached across the table, placing my hand gently over hers again. But you came back, I said. She nodded. For my medication, she replied. And the documents, I added softly. Her eyes flickered to the papers on the table. Yes, not just to retrieve them, but to protect them. To keep control of something that was being taken from her piece by piece. You did the right thing, I said firmly. She looked at me, uncertainty still lingering. Did I? She asked. Yes, I said without hesitation. You trusted your instincts. That matters. She let out a slow breath, some of the tension leaving her shoulders. I was starting to feel like I was the problem, she admitted. That sentence cut deeper than anything else she had said. Because that's what pressure does. It makes you doubt yourself, makes you question your own judgment. You're not the problem, I said gently. You're the one being pressured. Her eyes filled again, but this time she didn't look away. I didn't want to believe that about my own daughter, she said. I nodded slowly. I understand. Because I did. More than I wanted to. I thought of Daniel, of the boy he used to be, and the man sitting behind those decisions now. There was a long silence between us. Not empty, but heavy with everything that had been said, and everything that hadn't. Finally, Patricia spoke again. What do we do now? She asked. The question was simple, but the answer was anything but. I straightened slightly, my mind already moving through the next steps. "We don't let them rush you," I said. "We don't let them pressure you into signing anything tonight." She nodded slowly. "And if they come back?" she asked. I met her gaze. "Then we're ready." There was a steadiness in my voice now that hadn't been there before. Because this wasn't just about understanding anymore. It was about action, about protecting someone who had been placed in a vulnerable position, and about facing a truth I hadn't wanted to see. My son was part of this. But that didn't mean I would stand by and let it happen. Not tonight, not ever again. I glanced toward the living room where Ethan still sat, the soft glow of the television flickering across his face. He deserved better than this. We all did. And for the first time since I walked into that house, I wasn't just reacting anymore. I was preparing. I didn't waste time. Whatever Daniel and Emily were planning, they had already set a deadline tonight. That meant every minute we stayed in that house waiting, reacting, was a minute closer to them regaining control. And I wasn't going to let that happen. "We need to leave," I said quietly. Patricia looked up startled. "Leave?" she repeated. "Yes," I said firmly, "before they come back. Before they try to corner you again." Her eyes flickered toward the front door, then back to me. "I don't want to run," she said softly. "This isn't running," I replied. "This is choosing where you stand." That seemed to settle something inside her. She nodded. "Okay." I stood up, already moving. "Get what you need. Not everything, just what matters." She gathered the documents, immediately folding them carefully and slipping them back into her coat. The prescription bottle followed, tucked securely into her pocket. I walked into the living room. "Ethan," I said gently, kneeling beside him. "We're going to take a little trip, okay?" He blinked up at me. "A trip?" "Just for tonight," I said. "Somewhere quiet." He looked past me toward the kitchen where Patricia stood. "Is Grandma Patricia coming too?" "Yes." That was all he needed. He nodded. "Okay. No questions. No resistance." That alone told me how much he had already felt. I grabbed my purse, my phone, and the small bag of cookies. Then I paused. Something wasn't right. "Ethan," I said, "can you get your backpack?" He stood up immediately and ran to his room. A moment later, he returned with a small blue backpack, slightly overstuffed. "Good," I said, taking his hand again. We moved toward the front door together. The suitcase was still there. Patricia's suitcase. I looked at it for a brief moment, then back at her. "Take it," I said. She hesitated. "It's too obvious," she murmured. "That's the point," I replied. "You're not hiding anymore." There was a quiet strength in that moment. She reached down and pulled the handle up, the soft click echoing through the entryway. For a second, everything felt still, like the house itself was watching us leave. Then I opened the door. The evening air hit my face, cool and grounding. We stepped outside. I didn't look back. The drive was quiet at first. Ethan sat in the back seat, his small hands resting in his lap, his eyes fixed on the passing houses. Patricia sat beside me in the front, the suitcase at her feet. No one spoke for several minutes. But the silence wasn't empty. It was processing, shifting. "What now?" Patricia asked finally. "I called someone," I said. "A lawyer, someone I trust." She nodded slowly. "Do you think he can help?" "Yes," I said without hesitation. "But we need to be careful." Careful how I glanced at her briefly before returning my eyes to the road. "Daniel and Emily are expecting you to come back," I said. "Or at least..." They're expecting control. And now they won't have it, she said. No, I replied. And that's when people like them become unpredictable. She didn't argue, because she knew I was right. We pulled into my driveway about 15 minutes later. My house wasn't large, it wasn't new, but it was safe. And right now, that was enough. Come on, I said, stepping out of the car. Ethan climbed out quickly, staying close to my side. Patricia followed, pulling the suitcase behind her. As we walked inside, I felt something shift again. Not just in the situation, in me. This wasn't just a reaction anymore. It was a line. And I had crossed it. I locked the door behind us. Make yourselves comfortable, I said. I'll be right back. Ethan immediately settled onto the couch, pulling his knees up and wrapping his arms around them. Patricia stood near the doorway for a moment, unsure. This is your space now, I said gently. You don't have to ask permission. She gave me a small, grateful nod and sat down beside Ethan. I stepped into the kitchen and pulled out my phone. Right on time it rang. Harold, I answered immediately. I was about to call you, I said. I've looked into it, he replied, his tone sharp, focused. Sylvia, if those documents are what you described, and if there's pressure involved, this could be serious. Financial exploitation of an elderly person. I thought so, I said quietly. Do you have proof? Yes, I replied. Documents. A voicemail. And possibly more. Good, he said. That's important. I leaned against the counter, lowering my voice. They gave her a deadline. Tonight. That's a red flag, he said immediately. Legitimate agreements don't come with ultimatums like that. I know. Where are you now? He asked. At my house. She's with me. Good, he said again. Keep her there. Do not let her go back until we've reviewed everything. I won't. And Sylvia, his voice softened slightly, this involves your son. I know I said. There was a brief pause. That doesn't change what needs to be done, he added. No, I replied quietly. It doesn't. We ended the call shortly after with plans to meet the next morning. I set the phone down and stood there for a moment, letting it all settle. Then I heard it. A faint rustling sound. I turned. Ethan stood in the doorway watching me. Are we staying here tonight? He asked. Yes, I said, walking over to him. We are. He nodded slowly. Okay. But something in his expression told me that wasn't all he wanted to say. What is it? I asked gently. He hesitated, then reached into his backpack. I found something, he said. My heart skipped. Found what? He pulled out a folded piece of paper. Carefully. Like it mattered. I wasn't supposed to see it, he added. I took it slowly, unfolded it, and felt the air leave my lungs. It was a copy of the document. One of them. Power of attorney. But that wasn't what made my hands tighten. It was the section near the bottom, the part outlining control, full financial authority granted to Daniel Barrett. My son. My grip on the paper tightened. He had this in his room, Ethan said quietly. I thought it was important. I looked down at him. You did the right thing, I said softly, because he had, more than he should have ever needed to. I folded the paper carefully, my mind already racing ahead. This wasn't just suspicion anymore, it was evidence, clear, undeniable. And it changed everything, because now when Daniel and Emily came looking, and I knew they would, They wouldn't just be dealing with a confused situation. They would be facing the truth. And for the first time since this began, we had the upper hand. The first call came at 8:17 p.m. I didn't have to look at the screen to know who it was. Something in my chest tightened the moment the phone started vibrating against the kitchen counter, a quiet insistence that matched the tension building in the house. I let it ring once, twice, 3 times. Then I picked it up. "Hello, Sylvia. Where are you?" Emily's voice came through sharp and controlled, but there was an edge to it now, something strained beneath the surface. "I'm at home," I said calmly. A brief pause. "With Ethan?" "Yes." "And my mother?" There it was. Direct. I didn't answer immediately. "I asked you a question," Emily pressed. "I heard you," I replied evenly. "And I'm deciding how to answer it." Another pause, this one heavier. "You took her," Emily said. "No," I said quietly. "She left. I gave her somewhere safe to go." "That's not your decision to make," she snapped. "It became my decision the moment I realized what was happening in your house." Silence. Then colder now. "You don't understand the situation." "I understand enough," I said. I saw where she was sleeping Emily, her breath hitched just slightly. That was temporary. In a laundry room, I asked, my voice still calm but firm. "On a tile floor." She insisted, Emily said quickly. She didn't want to make things difficult. The deflection was almost impressive, but not convincing. "She was crying," I said. Emily didn't respond to that. Instead, she shifted. "This isn't about that," she said. "She has legal matters to settle and she's delaying everything." "She's asking for time," I corrected. "That's not the same thing." "She agreed to this," Emily insisted. "Did she agree I asked quietly, or did you tell her she had no other option that landed?" I could hear it in the silence that followed. "You're overstepping," Emily said finally. "And you're pressuring your own mother to sign legal documents under a deadline," I replied. "We're both past where we should be." Her tone changed then. Not softer, sharper. "You need to bring her back," she said. "No." The word came out before I even had to think about it. Flat, certain, immediate. Another pause. Longer this time. "You don't get to say no," she said slowly. I just did. A faint sound came through the line like she had pulled the phone away and then brought it back. "You have no idea what you're interfering with," she said. "I think I do," I replied. I listened to the voicemail from the lawyer. I saw the documents. That shifted something. "What voicemail?" she asked quickly. "The one about the power of attorney and asset transfer," I said. "The one Daniel confirmed." Silence. Then, "You went through our messages," she demanded. "They were left on the house phone," I said, "where your son could have heard them. That's none of your business. It became my business when you made it my problem." Her breathing changed. Faster now. Less controlled. "You're twisting this," she said. "She needs help managing her finances. We're trying to protect her by giving Daniel full control." I asked. Another pause. "You don't know what you're talking about." "I know exactly what I'm talking about," I said, my voice still steady. "I have the documents, Emily." That was the moment everything shifted. Not just in her tone, in the entire conversation. "You what?" she said, her voice dropping. "I have them," I repeated. There was a rustle on the other end. Then another voice. "Daniel." "Sylvia," he said, calmer but with a tightness underneath. "Daniel," I replied. "What's going on?" he asked. "You tell me," I said. A brief exhale. "Mom, you shouldn't be involved in this," he said. I closed my eyes for just a second. That word, Mom, it sounded so normal, so familiar. And yet, everything behind it had changed. "I'm already involved," I said quietly. "And you know why? This is a misunderstanding," he said. "Emily's mom asked for help. We're helping her." "By setting a deadline?" I asked. "By telling her she has nothing if she doesn't sign tonight?" "That's not what happened," he said quickly. "Then explain it to me," I said. Silence. "Then it's complicated." "No," I replied. "It's not." I could feel my heartbeat in my throat now, not from fear, from clarity. "You're asking her to sign over control of her finances," I said, "without independent advice, under pressure. That's not help." "You're making it sound worse than it is," Daniel said. "I don't need to make it sound like anything," I replied. "It already is what it is." Another silence. Then Emily again, her voice cutting through. "Enough," she said. "You need to bring her back. Tonight." "No," I said again. Or what she challenged. The question hung there, sharp, daring. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't hesitate. "Or we handle this properly," I said, "with legal oversight, with representation, without pressure." "That's not necessary," she snapped. "It is now," I replied. A long pause followed, and when Emily spoke again, her voice was colder than I had ever heard it. "If you don't bring her back," she said slowly, "we'll call the police." I felt something inside me go still. On what grounds, I asked. "Interference. Custody. Whatever we need to say." I glanced toward the living room where Ethan sat quietly beside Patricia. "You want to involve the police?" I said softly. "Then we'll involve them." That caught her off guard. "What does that mean?" she asked. "It means," I said, my voice steady, "that if they show up, I'll show them everything. The documents, the voicemail, the pressure, silence, heavy, uncertain." "You wouldn't do that," she said finally. "I already am," I replied. Another shift, another crack. "You're turning this into something it's not," she said. "No," I said. "I'm stopping it from becoming something worse." There was a long pause. Then Daniel spoke again. "Mom, just bring her back. We can talk about this." The word talk felt empty now, like something meant to soften what had already hardened. "No," I said. And this time it felt different. Not just firm, final. Another silence. Then fine Emily said, "One word, sharp, controlled. We'll come get her." The line went dead. I stood there for a moment, the phone still in my hand, listening to nothing, but feeling everything, because I knew what that meant. They weren't asking anymore. They were coming. And whatever happened next wasn't going to be quiet. I didn't tell Patricia right away, not because I wanted to hide anything, but because I needed a moment to think, to steady myself before the next part began. Because the moment I told her they were coming, everything would shift again. The quiet we had built inside my home would break, and once it did, there would be no going back. I set the phone down slowly on the counter, my fingers lingering there for a second longer than necessary. "They're coming, aren't they?" Patricia's voice came from behind me, soft, but certain. I turned. She stood in the doorway, her hands wrapped tightly around each other, her posture already bracing for what she knew was inevitable. "Yes," I said. "No reason to soften it. No reason to pretend." Her shoulders sank just slightly, but she didn't look away. "And they're not coming to talk," she added. "No," I said again. We stood there for a moment, the weight of that reality settling between us. Then I took a breath, which means we don't wait for them to define what happens next. She nodded slowly. "What do we do?" I gestured toward the kitchen table. "We prepare." We sat down together, the documents spread out between us again, but this time they didn't feel like something looming over her. They felt like evidence, something solid, something we could use. "Show me everything," I said. She unfolded each paper carefully, smoothing them flat. Her hands still trembled slightly, but there was more control in her movements now. "Start from the top," I added. We went through them one by one. Power of attorney, asset transfer, authorization for liquidation. Each document structured in a way that looked clean, professional, almost reassuring. But underneath that control, total control. This one, I said, tapping lightly on the page, gives Daniel authority over all financial decisions. She nodded. "He said it would make things easier." "Easier for him," I replied. She didn't argue, because now she saw it too. "And this one, I continued, transfers access to your accounts." Her fingers tightened slightly. I didn't understand all of it at first, she admitted, but something didn't feel right. "That feeling matters," I said firmly. "You trusted it. That's why we're here." She exhaled slowly. For the first time since I had met her, there was something different in her expression. Not just fear, awareness, understanding. "Is it illegal?" she asked quietly. "It can be," I said. "Especially if there's pressure involved. Especially if you're being rushed." She nodded again. "I was being rushed." "Yes," I said. "And they knew it." Silence followed. Not uncertain this time, resolved. From the living room, I could hear the soft murmur of the television. Ethan hadn't moved. He was still where we left him, his small world contained within the flickering screen. But I knew he was listening. Children always listen, even when they pretend not to. "We need to gather everything we have," I said. "What do you mean?" "Anything that shows what's been happening," I replied. "Messages, documents, anything that proves you didn't agree willingly." She thought for a moment. "There are emails," she said. "And text messages." "Good," I said. "We'll need those." I reached for my phone. "Harold said we need to be ready," I added. "If they show up, we don't argue. We don't react emotionally. We present facts." Patricia nodded slowly. "Facts," she repeated, but I could see the hesitation still there. "They're my family," she said quietly. The words landed gently, but heavily. "I know," I replied, because I did, more than she realized. "They're mine too," I added. Her eyes lifted to mine, and in that moment, something passed between us. Not just understanding, shared pain. Because this wasn't just about stopping something wrong. It was about facing the truth about the people we loved and what they were capable of. A sudden sound broke the moment. Headlights, cutting across the front window. Both of us turned. My heart didn't race. It didn't spike. It steadied. Because I knew. "They're here," Patricia whispered. I stood up slowly. "Then we meet them on our terms." She remained seated for a second longer, then stood too. I walked into the living room. Ethan looked up immediately. "Are they here?" he asked. "Yes," I said. He didn't panic. He didn't cry. He just nodded. "Okay." I walked over and crouched down in front of him. "You stay right here," I said gently. "You don't need to say anything. Just stay close to Grandma Patricia." He nodded again. "I will." I stood up, my eyes moving to the front door. Another sound. A car door closing. Then another. Footsteps. Approaching. I took a slow breath, centered myself, and then walked forward. I didn't wait for them to knock. I opened the door first. Emily stood on the porch, her posture rigid, her expression tight. Daniel stood slightly behind her, his face composed but his eyes sharper than I had ever seen them. For a moment no one spoke. Then Emily stepped forward. "We're taking my mother home," she said. Not a question, not even a request. A statement. I didn't move. "No," I said. The word landed between us like a line drawn in the ground. Emily's eyes narrowed. "You don't get to decide that." "I didn't decide it," I replied. "She did." "That's not true," she snapped. "You're influencing her." I held her gaze. "She's inside," I said. "You can ask her yourself." Emily hesitated. That hesitation said everything, because if she truly believed Patricia would agree, she wouldn't have needed to argue. Daniel stepped forward slightly. "Mom," he said, his tone calm, controlled. "This doesn't have to turn into something bigger." I looked at him, really looked, at the man standing where my son used to be. "It already has," I said quietly. His jaw tightened. "We're just trying to help her," he said. "Then why the deadline?" I asked. Silence. "Why the pressure?" I continued. Another silence. "Why the documents giving you full control?" That one hit. I saw it. The flicker. The crack. And for a brief moment. Daniel didn't have an answer. Emily stepped in again. "This is none of your business," she said sharply. "It became my business the moment it stopped being right," I replied. She let out a short breath. "You're making a mistake." "No," I said. "I'm correcting one." Another silence. Heavy. Unavoidable. And then, "She's not signing anything tonight," I added. That was the moment everything changed. Because this time, I wasn't just reacting, I was stating the outcome. And they knew it. For a moment, no one moved. The porch light cast a soft yellow glow over all of us, but there was nothing warm about the scene. It felt like standing at the edge of something like one wrong word could tip everything into chaos. Emily was the first to break. "This is ridiculous," she said, her voice tight with controlled anger. "You're turning this into a spectacle." "I'm turning it into the truth," I replied. Daniel stepped forward slightly, positioning himself just enough to shift the balance of the moment. "Mom," he said, lowering his voice, trying a different approach now. "Let's not do this out here. Let's talk inside." The familiarity of that word mom almost pulled something in me. Almost, but not enough. "No," I said. His expression hardened. "Why not?" "Because this isn't a private conversation anymore," I replied. "Not when it involves pressure legal documents and someone being told they'll lose everything if they don't comply." Emily let out a sharp breath. "You're exaggerating." "Am I asked quietly. Silence. I stepped aside just enough to open the doorway behind me. "Come in," I said. "Talk to her directly." That was the moment they hesitated. Both of them. Just for a second. But it was enough, because people who are confident in their version of events don't hesitate. They move forward. Emily recovered first. "Fine," she said, brushing past me. Daniel followed. The air shifted the moment they stepped inside. Tighter. Colder. Ethan sat exactly where I had left him, his small body still, his eyes wide but quiet. Patricia stood beside him. She didn't step back. She didn't shrink. She just stood. And for the first time since I had met her, she looked steady. "Mom," Emily said, her tone changing, instantly softer, almost pleading. "What are you doing here?" Patricia didn't answer right away. She looked at her daughter. Really looked at her. "I could ask you the same thing," she said finally. The room went still. Emily blinked, caught off guard. "What does that mean?" she asked. "It means," Patricia said, her voice calm but firm. "I didn't expect to be pressured in your home." Daniel stepped in. "No one pressured you," he said. Patricia turned to him. "You told me it would be easier if I just signed," she replied. Daniel's jaw tightened. "That's not pressure. That's practicality." "No," she said quietly. "That's dismissal." The word landed harder than anything else. Emily crossed her arms. "This is getting out of hand," she said. "We're trying to help you." "By giving you control over everything I own?" Patricia asked. "That's not what it is," Emily snapped. "Then explain it," I said. Emily turned sharply toward me. "You need to stay out of this." "I'm not leaving," I replied. Her eyes flashed. "This doesn't concern you. It concerns me because it's happening in my family," I said, "and because I have the documents." That stopped her. Again. What documents, she asked, though her tone said she already knew. I walked over to the table and picked them up. "These ones," I said, holding them out. Emily didn't take them. Daniel did. He flipped through the pages quickly, his expression tightening with each one. "Where did you get these?" he asked. "Patricia brought them," I said. He glanced at her. "You weren't supposed to take those." The words slipped out before he could stop them, and the moment they did, everything shifted. Emily's head turned sharply toward him. "Daniel." But it was too late, because now it was clear, not just suspicion, not just concern, control. "You weren't supposed to take them," I repeated. Daniel exhaled slowly, trying to recover. "That's not what I meant." "Yes, it is," Patricia said quietly. Silence filled the room again, but this time, it wasn't uncertain. It was exposed. Emily stepped forward. "This is being twisted," she said. "These are standard documents." "Standard doesn't mean appropriate," I replied. "They're legal," she insisted. "Legal doesn't mean ethical," I said. Her expression hardened. "You're making this into something it's not." "No," I said. "I'm calling it what it is." Daniel ran a hand through his hair. "This is getting out of control," he muttered. "No," I said again. "It's coming into control." Another silence. Then a knock at the door. 3 firm, unmistakable knocks. Everyone froze. Emily turned toward the sound. Daniel's eyes followed. I didn't move. Because I already knew. "They're here," I said. Emily frowned. "Who?" I walked toward the door. "The police," I replied. That changed everything. What she snapped. "You said you were going to call them," I said calmly. "So I did too." I opened the door. 2 officers stood on the porch. Professional, neutral. "Good evening," one of them said. "We received a call regarding a family dispute." "Yes," I said. "Please come in." They stepped inside, their presence immediately shifting the energy in the room. Controlled. Observed. "What seems to be the issue?" the second officer asked. I gestured toward the table. There are concerns about financial pressure being applied to an elderly individual, I said. Emily stepped forward. That's not true, she said quickly. This is a misunderstanding. The officer looked between us. Ma'am, he said, turning to Patricia. Are you feeling pressured to sign any documents? Patricia hesitated. For just a second. And in that second, I could see everything she was weighing. Her daughter, her past, her hope that maybe this wasn't what it looked like. But then she looked at Ethan, and something in her changed. Yes, she said. The word was quiet, but it was enough. The room went still. Can you explain how the officer asked? Patricia took a breath. They told me I needed to sign tonight, she said, or I would lose their support. The officer nodded slowly. And do you understand the documents you were being asked to sign? No, she admitted. Were you given time to review them independently? No. The officer turned to Daniel and Emily. Is that accurate? Daniel opened his mouth, then closed it. Emily stepped in. We were trying to help her, she said. That may be, the officer replied. But pressure under a deadline, especially involving financial authority, raises concerns. The second officer stepped closer to the table, glancing at the documents. These appear to grant significant control, he said. Daniel shifted uncomfortably. It's temporary, he said. Temporary or not, the officer replied. It must be voluntary and informed. Silence. Heavy. Final. And then the smallest voice in the room spoke. Ethan. Daddy said Grandma Patricia was worth more if she signed. The words landed like a crack through glass. Everyone turned. Daniel froze. Emily's face went pale. And in that moment, there was no more room for denial. No one spoke for a few seconds after Ethan's words. It wasn't just silence. It was rupture. The kind that splits a room clean down the middle and shows you in one breath what people are made of when there's nowhere left to hide. Daniel's face lost color first. Not all at once, just a slow drain, as if something inside him had been unplugged. Emily's jaw tightened, her eyes flicking from Ethan to the officers, to me, calculating, recalibrating. Ethan, she said, forcing her voice into something gentle. That's not what your father meant. He didn't move from the couch. He didn't look at her. His small hands were clasped together, knuckles pale. I heard him, he said quietly. The officer nearest him crouched down slightly, not too close, not too far. Hey, buddy, he said, voice even. You're not in trouble. We just need to understand what's going on. Ethan nodded once. Daniel stepped forward a little too quickly. Look, this is getting blown out of proportion, he said, his tone tight but trying for calm. He's a child. He doesn't understand context. I felt something in me go very still. Then explain the context, I said. Daniel's eyes snapped to mine. For a second, I saw something old there, defiance, the kind he used to have as a teenager when he thought he could talk his way out of anything. Mom, please, he said under his breath. Not like this, like what I asked. With witnesses. Emily exhaled sharply, stepping in again. This is a family matter, she said to the officers. We don't need this escalated. The taller officer shook his head slightly. When financial documents and potential coercion are involved, it's not just a private matter anymore, he said. Ma'am? He turned back to Patricia. Do you feel safe here tonight? Patricia didn't answer immediately. She looked at Emily. Really looked at her. And in that look, I saw years of something unspoken hope, disappointment, maybe even love that had never quite known where to go. I feel safer here than I did there, she said finally. Emily flinched. Mom? No, Patricia said, lifting a hand not in anger, but in boundary. Don't call me that right now. The words were quiet, but they drew a clear line. Emily's eyes flashed. You're choosing her over me, she asked, jerking her chin in my direction. Patricia didn't look at me. I'm choosing myself, she said. That landed harder than anything else that had been said tonight. Because it wasn't an accusation, it was a decision. Daniel took a step back, running a hand over his face. This isn't what it looks like, he muttered more to himself than to anyone else. Then say what it is, I replied. He didn't. The second officer moved closer to the table, picking up one of the documents with careful hands. Sir, he said to Daniel, this grants you full financial authority over Ms. Carter's accounts and assets. Were you advising her to sign this tonight? Daniel hesitated. Yes, he said finally. Under what circumstances? He swallowed. We were on a timeline. There are financial considerations. What kind of considerations? The officer pressed. Daniel glanced at Emily, just for a second. But it was enough. Investments, he said. Opportunities that require liquidity. Liquidity from her assets, the officer clarified. Daniel didn't answer. Emily stepped in again, sharper now. You're interrogating us like we've committed a crime. No one is accusing you of a crime at this moment, the officer replied evenly. We're establishing whether there was undue pressure placed on an elderly individual regarding significant financial decisions. Patricia spoke before anyone else could. There was, she said. The room stilled again. Can you describe it? The officer asked. Patricia took a breath. They told me I had until tonight to sign, she said. They said if I didn't, I would have to leave and I wouldn't receive any help from them. The officer nodded, jotting something down. Were you given the opportunity to seek independent legal advice? No. Were you encouraged to do so? No. Daniel shifted again. We didn't think it was necessary, he said. That's not your determination to make, the officer replied. Another silence. Heavy. Final. I watched Daniel then not as a mother, but as someone trying to understand how a person arrives at a place like this. His shoulders had dropped slightly. The controlled calm he had been holding on to was slipping piece by piece. Why, I asked quietly. The question wasn't loud, but it cut through everything. He looked at me. For a moment, I thought he wouldn't answer. Then, I needed it, he said. The honesty was abrupt, unpolished, real. Emily turned sharply toward him. Daniel? No, he said, shaking his head. It's already out. He looked back at me. I made a bad investment, he said. A big one. I thought I could recover it, but I couldn't. I felt my chest tighten. How much, I asked. He hesitated. Enough that I couldn't fix it alone. The room seemed to shrink around those words. And so you decided to use her? I asked. It wasn't like that, he said quickly. We were going to manage it, grow it, give it back. Without her control, I said. Temporarily, he insisted. Under pressure, I added. He didn't answer. Because he couldn't. Emily stepped forward again, her composure cracking now. You're acting like we were stealing from her, she said. You were taking control of everything she has, I replied. What would you call that? She would have been taken care of, Emily said. On your terms, Patricia said quietly. That stopped her. Again. The officer cleared his throat slightly. At this point, he said I would strongly advise that no documents be signed tonight. Ms. Carter has the right to independent counsel and time to review any agreements. He looked at Patricia. Do you understand that? Yes, she said. Do you wish to proceed with signing anything this evening? No. The word was steady. Certain. Final. The officer nodded. Then that's where we stand. He turned to Daniel and Emily. I recommend you respect that decision. Neither of them spoke, because there was nothing left to say. Not tonight. Not like this. I looked at Daniel one more time, not with anger, not even with disappointment, just with clarity. You don't get to fix one mistake by creating another, I said quietly. He didn't argue. He just stood there. And for the first time, he looked like he understood the weight of what he had done. The officers stayed just long enough to make the line unmistakably clear. No signatures tonight. No pressure. No further discussion that could be construed as coercion. When they left, the door closed with a soft final click that seemed to echo through the house longer than it should have. For a moment, no one moved. Daniel stood near the edge of the living room, his hands hanging loosely at his sides, his posture no longer controlled, just heavy. Emily remained closer to the door, her arms still crossed, but the sharp certainty she had carried with her earlier had dulled. Not gone, but fractured. Patricia sat beside Ethan, her hand resting lightly on his shoulder, and I stood between them all. Not as a mediator, not as a mother, but as someone who had drawn a line and meant it. You should go, I said quietly. Emily let out a short, disbelieving breath. That's it, she asked. You just get to shut us out. You shut her out first, I replied, nodding toward Patricia. Her jaw tightened. That's not what happened. She slept on your laundry room floor, I said. The words landed harder this time, because now there was no argument left to soften them. Emily looked away, just for a second. But I saw it. The flicker. The crack in the version of the story she had been holding on to. We were trying to manage a situation, she said, her voice lower now. At her expense, I replied. Silence. Daniel finally spoke. Emily, he said quietly, we should go. She turned toward him, her frustration flaring again. You're just going to walk away from this. What do you want me to do? He asked, his voice tired now. Argue with the police force. Hear her to sign something she doesn't want to. Emily didn't answer, because there wasn't an answer that would work anymore. Not here, not now. Daniel looked at Patricia. I didn't mean for it to go like this, he said. The words were simple, but they didn't undo anything. Patricia met his gaze. I believe you, she said softly. That seemed to catch him off guard. But that doesn't make it right, she added. He nodded once, slowly. Then he looked at Ethan. His expression shifted, something softer breaking through the tension. I'll call you tomorrow. Okay, he said. Ethan didn't respond. He just leaned slightly closer to Patricia. Daniel's shoulders dropped. He understood. Or at least, he was starting to. Emily grabbed her bag from the chair near the door, her movements sharper now, more abrupt. This isn't over, she said. I didn't react, because she was right. It wasn't. But not in the way she thought. No, I said calmly. It's just no longer happening like this. She held my gaze for a moment, then turned and walked out. Daniel followed slower this time. At the door, he paused. Just for a second. Then he left. The house fell quiet again, but this time, it wasn't tense. It was still. Different. I closed the door gently and turned back toward the living room. Patricia hadn't moved. Neither had Ethan. They were both sitting exactly where they had been, like the moment hadn't quite caught up with them yet. "It's over," I said softly. Patricia looked up at me. "Is it?" she asked. "For tonight?" I said. "Yes." She nodded slowly. And then, without warning, her shoulders shook. The first sob came quietly. Then another, and suddenly everything she had been holding in, every ounce of tension, fear, confusion broke free all at once. Ethan wrapped his arms around her immediately. "It's okay," he whispered, repeating the same words I had told him earlier. I walked over and sat beside them, placing a hand gently on Patricia's back. "You're safe," I said. She nodded, though the tears didn't stop right away, and I didn't try to make them. Some things need to be released before they can be healed. After a while, the sobs softened into quiet breaths. Patricia wiped her eyes, her voice still unsteady. "I didn't think it would come to this," she said. "I know," I replied. "I thought, if I just gave them time, if I trusted them." Her voice trailed off. "You did what you thought was right," I said gently. She shook her head. I ignored what I felt she admitted, and it almost cost me everything. I didn't argue, because that part was true. "But you didn't sign," I said. "You stopped." She looked at me. "And you helped me do that." I held her gaze. "You helped yourself," I said. The truth of that settled between us, not as comfort, but as strength. Ethan shifted slightly, looking up at both of us. "Does this mean Grandma Patricia is staying here?" he asked. Patricia hesitated. I didn't. "Yes," I said. "As long as she needs to." Ethan smiled. "A small one, but real." "Good," he said. That was enough. For now. Later that night, after Ethan had fallen asleep on the couch and Patricia had settled into the guest room, I stood alone in the kitchen. The house was quiet again, but not empty, not heavy, just quiet. I picked up my phone and looked at it for a moment before setting it back down. There would be more to handle. Legal steps, conversations, consequences. But those could wait until morning. Tonight, we had done what mattered. We had stopped something before it went too far. We had chosen truth over comfort and boundaries over silence. I walked to the window and looked out into the dark street. Somewhere out there, Daniel and Emily were driving home, sitting with the same silence, the same reality, and maybe for the first time they were seeing it clearly too. I didn't know what would happen next, whether there would be apologies, or distance, or something in between. But I knew this. Things wouldn't go back to the way they were. And maybe that was exactly what needed to happen. Morning came softly, not with noise or urgency, but with light, thin, pale light filtering through the kitchen window, touching the edges of the table, the counter, the quiet spaces where everything had changed the night before. I was already awake. I hadn't slept much. Not because I couldn't, but because my mind had been settling, replaying, reordering everything that had happened, not to question it, but to understand what it meant moving forward. The house felt different now. Not tense, not uncertain, just grounded. I moved quietly, making coffee, the familiar rhythm of it anchoring me. The simple act of pouring, waiting, breathing it gave shape to the stillness. Footsteps came from the hallway. I turned slightly. Patricia stood there, her robe wrapped loosely around her, her hair still slightly disheveled from sleep. But her face looked different, not untouched by what had happened, but no longer overwhelmed by it. "Good morning," I said gently. "Good morning," she replied. There was a pause. Then she stepped into the kitchen. "I slept," she said, almost like she was surprised. I smiled softly. "That's a good sign." She nodded. "It's the first full night I've had in a while." That didn't surprise me. Not after everything she had been carrying. "Coffee?" I asked. "Yes, please." I poured her a cup and slid it across the counter. She wrapped her hands around it, not drinking right away, just holding it, letting the warmth settle into her. "I kept thinking last night," she said slowly, "about how close I came." I didn't interrupt. "How easy it would have been to just sign," she continued. "To tell myself it wasn't a big deal, that it would all work out." Her fingers tightened slightly around the cup. And then I realized I wasn't signing because I understood. I was signing because I was tired. The honesty in that statement was quiet, but powerful. "Tired can make anything seem reasonable," I said. She nodded. "But it doesn't make it right." "No." I agreed. "It doesn't." We stood there in silence for a moment. Not uncomfortable, just reflective. "What happens now?" she asked. I leaned lightly against the counter. "Now we slow everything down," I said. "We get proper advice. We go through every document carefully. And we make decisions based on what you want, not what anyone else needs." She listened carefully. "And Daniel and Emily?" she asked. There it was. The part that never goes away. The part that lingers after everything else settles. "We don't ignore what happened," I said. "But we don't rush that either." She nodded slowly. "I don't know how to talk to her right now," she admitted. "You don't have to," I said. "Not today." That seemed to ease something in her. A boundary. Simple, but necessary. Ethan's voice broke the moment gently. "Grandma." We both turned. He stood in the hallway rubbing his eyes, his hair tousled from sleep. "Good morning," I said softly. He walked into the kitchen, heading straight for Patricia. "Are you still here?" he asked. She smiled, a real one this time. "Yes, I am." He nodded, satisfied. "Good. That word again. Simple, but full." He climbed into one of the chairs, resting his chin on the table. "Are we still having pancakes?" he asked. I blinked. "Pancakes." "You said maybe last night," he replied. I smiled. "I did, didn't I? He nodded. "Then yes," I said. "We are." And just like that, something shifted again. Not dramatically, not loudly, but meaningfully, because life doesn't always restart with big moments. Sometimes it begins again with small ones. Breakfast, conversation, presence. I moved around the kitchen, pulling out ingredients, the familiar rhythm returning. Ethan talked about a show he had watched. Patricia listened occasionally, adding a quiet comment. And for the first time since I had stepped into Daniel's house the night before, it felt like we were breathing again. Later that morning, Harold arrived. He sat at the same table, reviewing the documents carefully, his expression focused. "These are extensive," he said after a while, "and they grant significant control." Patricia nodded. "I didn't understand all of it." "That's exactly why you shouldn't have been asked to sign under pressure," he replied. He looked at me. "You were right to intervene." I didn't respond. Not because I disagreed, but because it didn't feel like something to be proud of. It felt like something that should never have been necessary. "We'll go through this step by step," Harold continued. "You have options, and more importantly, you have time." time. The one thing that had been taken from her before, now restored. Patricia let out a slow breath. "Thank you," she said. He nodded. "That's what I'm here for." After he left, the house returned to its quiet rhythm. But it wasn't the same quiet as before. This one had weight, meaning, direction. That afternoon, I found myself standing near the hallway looking at Patricia's suitcase. Still packed, still ready, but no longer a symbol of displacement. Something else now. A beginning. "Do you need help unpacking?" I asked. She walked over, resting her hand lightly on the handle. "I'll take my time," she said. I nodded. "That sounds right." She smiled. A small one, but steady. And in that moment, I understood something clearly. Healing doesn't happen all at once. It happens in choices, in boundaries, in moments where you decide quietly that you deserve better, and you act on it. That evening, as the sun began to set again, I sat on the porch. The same light, the same stillness. But everything inside me felt different. Not lighter, not easier, but clearer. I had always believed that love meant standing by your family, supporting them, trusting them. But now, I understood something more. Love doesn't mean silence. It doesn't mean acceptance of what's wrong. It doesn't mean protecting people from the consequences of their actions. Sometimes, love means standing in front of them and saying, "No, not this, not anymore." I didn't know what would happen with Daniel or Emily. I didn't know if apologies would come or if distance would remain, but I did know this. Whatever happened next, it would be built on truth, not pressure, not control, not fear. And that was enough. Sometimes the most dangerous situations don't come from strangers. They come quietly wrapped in familiarity, in trust, in the belief that the people closest to us would never take advantage of us. But life has a way of testing that belief. And when it does, we're faced with a difficult truth. Love without boundaries can become vulnerability. Trust without awareness can become risk. Sylvia's story is not just about stopping a harmful decision. It's about recognizing the moment when silence becomes complicity and choosing to act. It's about listening to that quiet voice inside you that says something isn't right even when it would be easier to ignore it. And most importantly, it's about understanding that protecting someone, whether it's yourself or someone vulnerable, is never the wrong choice, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it changes relationships, even when it forces you to see people differently, because real love is not blind. It is honest. It is protective. And sometimes it is strong enough to say no. If you've ever faced a situation where you had to stand up for what was right even against your own family, I'd truly like to hear your story. Where are you watching from today? What time is it for you right now? Share your thoughts in the comments, and if this story resonated with you, don't forget to like and subscribe. You're not alone, and your voice matters.